The virome is not a living thing, and this is very important. So I've been lecturing on the microbiome for years, and I would always throw the viruses in at the end because people like to know that they're there. And so my whole pitch has been for a decade now. The microbiome is friendly. The microbiome is our foundation. There's not 3 good species of bacteria, so your probiotic is not correct. Like, there's not like all those bad guys and you have to overwhelm them with the good guys. This is not a battlefield. This is not a soccer field. This is literally an ecosystem of millions of species that are trying to be in relationship. And ultimately what we find out from that journey is the human immune system is actually that of diverse relationships in balance. And so there's only global immunity. There's only ecosystem immunity, which means balance or homeostasis. There's no such thing as human immune system. And what's really underscoring that is to start to do genomic assays on organ systems to find out that a healthy liver, a healthy kidney, a healthy bladder, a healthy breast all have microbiome in them actively working to nursemaid those organ systems into health. The way in which bacteria have been communicating to create diversity of life within their species and within the whole biome of the microbes is through horizontal gene transfer. This is where a single organism can bump next to an adjacent one and pass a piece of genetic information directly into their cytoplasm. And they can then take that up and we see this happen every day in ICUs. If you put somebody on antibiotics, there's going to be 1 or 2 of those bacteria that figure out a genetic loophole to the damage from that, and they can pass that horizontally, not through reproduction. They don't have to reproduce to pass on to their babies this resistance. They can instantaneously pass that skill set of genetic, update horizontally through the population, and suddenly a whole ICU is contaminated with all kinds of bacteria that are resistant to the drugs you've been using. Same thing happens in a farm field. 7 years into using the Roundup antibiotics across your crops, suddenly you have all sorts of weeds that are Roundup resistant, and they're growing. You've never had these weeds before, and suddenly they're going berserk in your field. There's been horizontal gene transfer across the species, from the microbes in the soil to the plants to the mitochondria within the protozoa, or the mitochondria within the earthworm. All of these things are capable of all this horizontal gene transfer. The real breakthrough in diversification of life, however, came not from horizontal gene transfer, but through the development of the virus. The virus is a long-distance package of genomic information update. And so now you didn't have to be adjacent to the bacteria that made the breakthrough of the software update that would allow for more resilience and more adaptive capacity. Instead, you could pass this over great distances. These have become so important to the way in which life happens on Earth that we cannot find a genome that's not entirely composed of viruses, really, in the end. We're slowly decoding the viral genome to understand how the human genome was built. And already, we're only a couple years into this process, and there's quadrillions of genes to consider. But in this process, we figured out that each of you are already, we know, at least 50% composed by direct insertion of viruses into your genome to allow you to be human. And to do that, it took millions of years of exposure to quadrillions and quadrillions and quadrillions of viruses to find the ones that you need. So in the transition from single-celled organisms into multi-celled organisms, then to mammals, we developed a better and better regulatory system as to which viruses we would turn on and replicate to spread throughout our system and to pass on to others, and which viruses we would go ahead and internalize into our genome to store for long-term data. And then a subset of those would even be integrated into our reproductive genome that would pass into a sperm or an ovum to go on to pass on a new gene trait to the humans that we would reproduce with. And so to do this, the virome became very good at targeting its information. And so the main difference, if there's any, between a virus and this horizontal gene transfer phenomenon where you're kind of passing information locally, is that the virus seems to be more specialized in its delivery system on the proteins on its surface to target it. And so this is very much like FedEx picking up a package. BAR scans it, knows exactly where that needs to go now, and it will show up halfway around the world on the right stoop. How the hell is that possible? Like, it's so bizarre that we're capable of delivering to that degree, and viruses are 10 times better. They're very specific. Not only does it know which cell it's going to show up on, it would be able to deliver itself into the exact drawer in your house that you wanted that thing to belong. Okay, it's so specific. It knows exactly which receptor on which type of cell it's going to touch, and it's carrying information to tell the cell what type of genomic information it has, so the cell knows whether or not it needs that and wants to reproduce that or not. So when we start to back up and ask, what is the virus? In the end, the virus is a non-living organism. We need to be clear about that. And so it's not part of the microbiome. It's not something that needs to be killed because it actually doesn't live. Instead, it's a targeted transfer system for genetics globally. And so when we say there's a viral pandemic, that is redundant. Life is a pandemic. That's how this earth began, is we had a pandemic of life occur here. And it was out of control beautiful. And it was out of control complex in its development because of its variety. And the human is a very pathetic snapshot of that beautiful pandemic of life that's occurred here. And to give you a sense of that, a flea has 30,000 genes. A human has 20,000 genes. A fruit fly has 13,000 genes. So you sit somewhere between a fruit fly and a flea in complexity.